The Young and the Restless spoilers shock Monday full episodes July 14, 2025. The aftermath of Mariah's trial had barely settled when whispers began to spread, first softly, then louder. Kane Ashby was celebrating. Not mourning his courtroom loss. Not nursing the bruises to his reputation or retreating to lick his wounds in private. No. He was out in public, raising a glass, and sitting shoulder to shoulder with none other than Kyle Abbott and Audra Charles. To some, it seemed like a strange gathering. To those who knew better, it was the inevitable alignment of opportunists circling the same wounded prey. Kane had tried, and failed, to take down Mariah, but his vendetta didn't begin or end with her. Kyle had his own list of scores to settle. And Audra? She never needed much incentive to dive into a scheme that promised power, chaos, or advantage. Together, the three of them laughed a little too loudly, drank a little too boldly, as though to drown out the reality that each of them, no matter how polished, was playing with fire. Across town, another storm was preparing to land. After weeks of silence, Adam Newman returned to Genoa City, suitcase in hand and storm in his eyes. No one knew where he had gone, but his arrival made it clear he hadn't been wasting time. He carried with him news, devastating, delicate, and deeply personal. About Chelsea Lawson. Sources close to the family revealed that Chelsea had suffered a serious mental health relapse while Adam was away, one that forced her into extended inpatient care. Though she was receiving the best treatment possible, the future remained uncertain. Adam's return wasn't just about sharing the burden, it was about finding his place again, especially now that the fabric of his world had changed. But he didn't come back to cry on anyone's shoulder. No. This version of Adam was sharp, focused, and surprisingly quiet, like a lion studying the battlefield before choosing where to pounce. Meanwhile, Claire Grace sat alone at Crimson Lights, wrapped in her grief like a second skin. The cafe buzzed with its usual rhythm, clinking cups, low conversations, the hum of machinery, but Claire was disconnected from it all. Her father, Cole Howard, was gone. A man she had only just begun to understand, to love, to claim as her own. Suddenly vanished from her life, taken by the slow cruelty of cancer. She hadn't known how deep her attachment had grown until it was ripped from her. Every corner of the town now whispered his absence. The books they'd shared. The memories barely formed. The apologies half said. And now, there would be no more time. Her solitude was broken by Holden, who approached quietly, respectfully, almost shyly, though there was nothing casual about the way he watched her. "How's your dad?" he asked gently. Claire lifted her eyes. "He's gone," she replied simply. The words hung in the air, heavier than silence. Holden's response was soft, sincere, "I'm sorry." And maybe it was the way he said it, or maybe it was the fact that he didn't try to say more than that, but something in Claire shifted. Her walls didn't crumble, but they wavered. She told him that she liked to believe Kyle could feel her pain, that somewhere in his heart, he knew she needed him. That maybe, despite everything, Kyle would come back to her. Holden didn't argue. He didn't remind her of the celebration Kyle was having with Audra. He simply nodded and said, "I'm here. I always am." And then he admitted something she didn't expect, that he too had lost his father years ago, to the same disease. A quiet understanding passed between them, two people linked not just by grief, but by the echoes of men they couldn't save. Claire spoke of how little time she'd had with Cole. How just as she started to see him as a father, he was ripped away. She talked about the guilt, how she had let anger steal their first months together, how she never got to say goodbye the way she wanted. Then, perhaps to mask the ache, she said she would bury herself in work, let the distractions carry her until the pain became manageable. Holden, ever the gentle agitator, smiled and offered a different escape, "Or you could come to breakfast with me. I'll distract you myself." Claire hesitated and declined at first. But when Holden offered to give her his number just in case, something inside her wavered. She accepted. And then, at the last moment, she surprised them both by changing her mind. Actually, maybe breakfast's a good idea. It wasn't a date. It wasn't a promise. But it was a choice. One that could ripple far deeper than either of them realized. Back at the Newman ranch, Adam sat down with Nick, the silence between them stretching. He spoke briefly about Chelsea, just enough to update, not enough to emote. But then he pivoted. "There's someone I met," he said. "A sharp kid. Smart. Knows how to read people. Could use some structure in his life." Nick raised an eyebrow. "You hiring?" "Not for me," Adam replied. "For you. Or for the company. I think he's got potential. His name's Holden." Nick filed the name away, unaware of just how close that name was already weaving into the Newman tapestry. At the same time, Kyle's celebration with Audra and Kane took on a more conspiratorial tone. Over drinks, they discussed Mariah's trial, how close she'd come to being convicted, and what it meant for the future. Audra, sharp as ever, floated the idea of exploiting the fallout, possibly targeting Sharon's reputation or manipulating public perception against the Newmans. Kane, though still seething with personal resentment, admitted that his legal maneuvering hadn't landed the final blow. But the war, as far as he was concerned, was far from over. And Kyle? He mostly listened. But in his silence was calculation. He wasn't just licking wounds from his failed marriage or his complicated grief, he was watching, planning, and perhaps finding comfort in the company of people who, like him, were tired of losing. Back in her own world, Mariah Copeland stared at herself in the mirror. The trial had ended. She had walked free. But freedom felt like a ghost, hovering but never settling. Her conversation with Sharon had left her hollow. Tess's distance felt final. And the weight of the child growing inside her was more than physical, it was spiritual, psychological, eternal. She hadn't told anyone that she'd felt relief when she ended that man's life. Not fear. Not sorrow. But peace. And now, as the town shifted back to its usual rhythms, Mariah remained in limbo. Waiting. Watching. Wondering whether the monster Ian had tried to make her into was still alive inside her. Or whether she had become something even worse on her own. The chessboard of Genoa City is full. Pieces are moving. Old alliances are shattering while new ones quietly form under the cover of grief, ambition, and necessity. Claire, seeking healing, may soon find herself caught between Holden's gentle persistence and Kyle's potential regret. Mariah, floating between redemption and retribution, may take another step toward the edge. And Adam, with one eye on Chelsea's fate and another on his family's future, is re-entering a game he once tried to quit. But Kane hasn't finished playing. And Audra? She never plays to lose. The question now is simple, but terrifying: whose move is next? The air in society felt heavier than usual, not because of the weather or the lighting, but because Adam Newman was carrying more than just grief. He had returned to Genoa City with the weight of Chelsea's mental relapse, the haunting decline of her emotional stability, and a name that was now surfacing like a long-buried landmine: Aristotle Dumas. The mere mention of him was enough to make Adam pause mid-sentence. This wasn't some forgotten associate or harmless ghost from the past, this was someone dangerous. Someone watching. Someone moving pieces from the shadows. And as Adam spoke to Nicky Newman, his tone was quiet but razor-sharp. "You must have sensed it too," he admitted. "I feel awful. I told everyone in Nice that they'd brought him back to Genoa City. I gave them false hope." That weight, that guilt, hung between his words like an invisible noose, reminding them both that the past never truly died, it just disguised itself in new names and colder strategies. But guilt would have to wait. Because Chelsea, seated across from Adam in their quiet corner, had just dropped a bombshell of her own. "It's Kane," she said plainly, her eyes steady. "Kane is the one backing Aristotle Dumas." The moment the words left her mouth, Adam's fingers curled slightly against his glass, the tension in his jaw signaling recognition and anger. "He's not doing it alone," Adam murmured. "He must have someone inside Genoa City. Someone feeding him intel. Someone we haven't accounted for." And just as that puzzle began to haunt him, the door opened. Two silhouettes stepped into view. Claire Grace, still cloaked in grief over her father's death, and Holden, calm, observant, and perhaps too perfect. Chelsea's eyes narrowed slightly. "I think I know who it is," she whispered. Adam turned, following her gaze. Chelsea leaned in. "Holden approached me out of town. Before I even knew Kane was involved, I saw the two of them talking. It wasn't casual, it was planned. And if Kane has a mole in Genoa City, my money's on Holden." Adam didn't question her. He knew Chelsea's instincts were rarely wrong, especially when they came from that dark place she only accessed when survival was at stake. And so, without hesitation, they stood up. Chelsea walked toward Holden and Claire, her smile measured, warm on the surface but layered with silent warning underneath. Adam stepped forward and addressed Claire first, his tone softening. "I'm so sorry about Cole," he said, his voice full of genuine compassion. "I plan to visit your mother soon." Claire nodded, clearly caught off guard by Adam's warmth. Then he turned to Holden, and the tone shifted. "I don't believe we've met. I'm Adam Newman." Holden extended a hand, his expression cautious but polite. "Holden Archer. Ever heard the name Aristotle Dumas?" Adam asked flatly. Holden blinked. "No. I've never met him." Adam stared for a moment, weighing every micro-expression. "What's next for you, Holden? Any plans?" Holden tilted his head, uncertain. "Not really. Taking things one day at a time." Adam offered the slightest smile. "Interesting. There might be something for you at Newman Media." Holden didn't mask his surprise. "I'll keep that in mind." As they turned to leave, Chelsea's voice reached Adam in a low, satisfied murmur. "Good. Very good." But the performance wasn't over yet. Claire and Holden sat down, the conversation between them shifting to a more intimate register. Claire's voice carried the weight of longing. "I miss Kyle," she admitted softly. Holden didn't flinch. He knew this wasn't a conversation he could win, it wasn't even a competition. "It's tough," he offered. "Especially with him being all the way in France." Claire looked down, her fingers tracing the rim of her water glass. "It's not just that he's there," she said. "It's that he's there with Audra." Her voice cracked slightly, and the bitterness was impossible to hide. "Should I be worried?" Holden hesitated. He wanted to comfort her. He also wanted to tell her the truth. But most of all, he wanted to keep her close. "I think the real question is whether he should be worried," Holden said gently. Claire didn't smile, but her eyes flickered with something deeper. Hurt. Fear. Anger. All tangled into one knot she hadn't found the strength to unravel. Kyle was gone. Audra was with him. And Claire, once so certain of their connection, now found herself floundering in uncertainty, clinging to pieces of a future that seemed to be slipping out of her reach. But Holden wasn't just a shoulder to cry on. Not anymore. If Chelsea was right, if he truly was Kane's inside man, then this entire act of compassion was part of a much larger strategy. But what did Holden truly want? Was he working for Kane out of loyalty, blackmail, or a hidden agenda of his own? And more importantly, how long could he hide in plain sight, now that Chelsea and Adam had locked onto him? Back at Newman Media, Adam began making calls. Not to offer Holden a job, but to set a trap. If Holden accepted, it would confirm everything. If he declined, it would mean something even more sinister, because it would prove he already had a better offer. From Kane. From Dumas. From someone orchestrating chaos not from the front lines, but from the shadows. Meanwhile, Chelsea wasn't done either. She contacted her old sources, the ones she hadn't touched since her darker days. She began digging into Dumas, tracing financials, aliases, shell corporations. If Holden really was the go-between, she'd find the proof. Because for Chelsea, this wasn't just about revenge, it was about redemption. Her past had nearly killed her. Her recovery was hard-earned. But now that she'd seen the kind of men Kane was aligning with, the kind of manipulation Holden was capable of, she refused to let another woman fall victim to the same trap. As the days passed, Claire found herself further entangled in Holden's company. He was kind, attentive, never crossing any boundaries, but always present. Her grief, still raw, made her vulnerable. Her memories of Kyle, still sharp, made her question everything. And Holden's timing was too perfect to ignore. She didn't know it yet, but she was being watched. Closely, quietly, strategically, by both sides of the battlefield. And Kane? He watched it all unfold from a distance, never needing to lift a finger. Because chaos, once seated, grows on its own. And with Holden moving through Genoa City like a phantom, Adam distracted by Chelsea's emotional turbulence, and Claire caught between loyalty, loss, and hope, Kane knew his next move didn't require force, only patience. But patience runs out. And when it does, the next war in Genoa City won't be fought in boardrooms or courtrooms. It'll be fought in the shadows, where spies become lovers, allies become liars, and the price of trusting the wrong person is blood. The French air was light with notes of lavender and crisp mountain breeze, but beneath the curated charm of the villa and the carefully arranged business dinners, something deeper lingered: tension. It shimmered quietly between Kyle Abbott and Audra Charles, unspoken but unmistakable. What began as a professional trip to develop a new fragrance line for Jabot had slowly morphed into something more intimate, more dangerous. The way their conversations trailed into silences, the way Kyle sometimes leaned in a fraction too close, and the way Audra always seemed to know exactly what to say to push him off balance, none of it was innocent. It was a game, sure. But the rules were blurred, and the stakes were rising. In the sleek lounge of their French suite, Kyle turned to her, eyes narrowing slightly as he inhaled deeply. "You're wearing perfume, aren't you?" he asked, not as a casual remark, but like a man seeking confirmation for an intuition. Audra's smile was languid. "Of course I am," she replied, tilting her head slightly to the side, exposing her neck. Without waiting for permission, Kyle stepped closer, leaned in, and let the scent envelop him, a bold, spicy base cut with something soft, unexpected, like jasmine hidden under a leather glove. It was defiant and alluring, just like her. But before the moment could evolve, the door opened and the mood shifted instantly. Kane Ashby entered like a shadow with purpose, cutting through the electricity in the air. Kyle pulled back from Audra without hesitation, straightening his jacket. "We were just working," he offered, perhaps too quickly. Kane's response was deceptively calm. "You don't need to explain anything," he said. "But I could have sworn you two were involved with other people. Am I mistaken?" The edge in his voice was subtle, but unmistakable. He wasn't here to accuse. He was here to study. Audra stepped forward with her trademark poise. "Our relationship is strictly professional," she replied coolly. "There's no confusion there." Kane nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "I've known Kyle a long time," he said. I don't know. But if you were invited here, to this level of the business, you must not be lacking in talent." He let the compliment dangle in the air. "A multi-talented woman," he added with a smirk that was both respectful and probing. Then, with his usual disarming charm, Kane pivoted the conversation. "I'm curious," he said. "This professional relationship of yours, how's it working out?" Audra didn't flinch. "I'm still figuring out what Kyle actually likes in a woman," she said, with enough ambiguity to leave both men guessing whether she meant perfume profiles, or something more personal? Kane chuckled, but his eyes slid to Kyle with sharpened interest. So why, he asked pointedly, are you going so easy on your competition, Kyle? Giving her a chance like this? There was no humor in his question, only the weight of deeper implications. Kyle paused for half a second too long. It's strategy, he answered finally. I believe in rewarding talent. Kane arched a brow. Is that what you call it? He leaned back, his tone casual, but his words barbed. Because I can't shake the feeling there's something more going on between you two. That did it. The tension snapped, and Kyle and Audra began to bicker. Not loudly, not dramatically, but sharply, trading barbed remarks about professional boundaries, influence, control, and who was really steering this fragrance ship. Kyle accused her of using seduction as a tool. Audra shot back that Kyle had let his feelings get in the way of sound judgment. The battle of perfume had become personal, their voices still polite but undercut by years of ambition, frustration, and unresolved tension. Kane listened, amused, then raised a hand to halt the sparring. This is getting fun, he said dryly. You two make soap operas look tame. So here's a thought, why don't you both let me help? Audra and Kyle stared at him. Kane smiled. Each of you give me a sample of your leading scent, and we'll go from there. Fresh eyes, fresh nose. Let the best perfume win. They hesitated, then agreed. It was an unexpected gesture of diplomacy. They clinked glasses to seal the deal, a truce forged in mistrust.